Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot here a day after the Browns beat the Steelers 13-6. They moved to 4-12 on the season, and this is a Hey, Mary Kay edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. All these questions coming from our Football Insider subscribers. Go to cleveland.com/Browns. It's the blue banner at the top of the page to get all the information about that and get involved. Mary Kay, I'm sure you can guess what a lot of these questions are about, so we'll start with this one. It comes from Mike Parker in Chester, Maryland. Hey, Mary Kay. He says Kevin Stefanski. Maybe it'll be Kevin, maybe it'll be the Browns, but I'll ask the question the way it was sent. Hey, Mary Kay, do you think Kevin Stefanski has seen enough of Shedeur Sanders to declare him as the starter in 2026 and not pursue a quarterback in free agency or the draft?
It's a great question. And I know the Browns wanted to get to the very end of these 7 starts. So he's got one more left. I think he can. I don't know that there's anything that he can really do in that final game that will make or break him. But I think they want to see all of the data from the 7 games and then let it sink in a little bit and decide, is he our guy going forward, or do we think that we want to go out and draft one of these other quarterbacks? Now, we know that they slipped from number 3 to number 6 already in the draft. If they beat the Bengals, they're slipping more, and the chances of getting and drafting a really good quarterback or one of the top quarterbacks will dwindle if they win this final football game against the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that will factor into this whole thing as well. But I do think that the Browns are getting close. I think they're getting close to saying, hey, we think we have something that we can work with here, and we want to see where we can take this. We want to see what he can do when he has an upgraded supporting cast, maybe another receiver or two, a brand new offensive line, maybe 2, 3, 4 more new offensive linemen. So I do think that they feel that there's going to be more to Shadour than he's been able to show so far. When he has an offseason to work with everyone, when he gets all those reps in training camp, and also when he has an upgraded supporting cast. So I'm going to say right now, right at this moment in time, and it could change, but at this moment in time, I'm going to say I think they are trending towards giving him that chance.
So I guess the question that goes with that is, and especially if we're, again, the questioner said Kevin Stefanski. So if Kevin Stefanski is back, and that's a big if right now, can he afford to be wrong? And we could, say that about Andrew Berry too. Can they afford to be wrong about Shedeur Sanders? If they just kind of looked at this and said, we're going to run this back with Shadour, he's going to be the number one. Deshaun Watson would be in the mix somehow. I don't know if that would include them adding another veteran or something like that, but basically coming back and saying, we're going to see what we've got with Shedeur Sanders with an offseason, a better supporting cast. Can either of these guys afford to be wrong?
That's a great question. Can they afford to be wrong on this decision? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say they can afford to be wrong because they've got another draft of good quarterbacks coming out in 2027. If they play their cards right and they don't go QB in this particular draft, they can trade down from their top pick again and probably pick up another first-round pick and be poised to maybe get a quarterback in 2027. Then you can always trade for a quarterback. You can sign a Malik Willis. You can, as you have mentioned a couple of times, Mac Jones, maybe trade for him. So I think there are some things that you can do to salvage this situation if you make a mistake. But I think they feel like it's a risk worth taking. And we'll have to see how it goes. I don't know if they'll end up there, but the further they fall down the NFL draft order, the more likely it is that they are going to give Shedeur Sanders that chance.
So I'll kind of keep going down this road a little bit. Would it be more likely that he would still have to compete and earn the job, but in a more fair way than it was this last time? Maybe fair is not the word, but obviously, like, we were all out there in the spring. We were all out there in training camp. He never had a legitimate shot to win that starting job. So could it be a situation where maybe they don't just clear the decks and say, you're our week 1 starter, but they say, okay, you're going to have a shot and we're going to bring in Malik Willis or Mac Jones, or we're going to draft somebody again in the 2nd round or the 3rd round. I think it's notable that maybe the best quarterback from this last draft class, and we'll see, there's still a long ways to go in all these guys' careers, might have been the guy the Saints took in the 2nd round. So you never know how a draft class is going to play out over time. But, maybe they take I keep thinking about Garrett Nussmeier. Where is he going to end up in all of this? How is some of these guys that maybe were thought to be better prospects, and then for whatever reason they fell off as the college season went along? Could you grab one of them later in the draft and bring them in to compete? Do you think it's a competition, or do you think it's we're going to clear the decks and you're our QB1 April 15th or whatever?
I think in the event that they decide they're moving forward with Shedeur Sanders, I think they let it roll with him. I think they would have Shadour and Deshaun Watson and Dylan Gabriel on the roster. And in the event that it seems like Shedeur needs a little bit more time, a little bit more seasoning, and could benefit from a few weeks on the bench watching Deshaun for a while, there's a world in which that can happen. But it seems more likely that they would want to let him learn by doing. He, by the way, is an active learner. He doesn't learn visually. He doesn't learn by reading or studying a playbook. He learns by doing. And because of that, I think they would trend towards letting him get out there and play and build on what he's done in these 7 games in hopes that as the season goes along, he gets better and better and better, and that he would be poised to make a run or at least keep things interesting into November and December. So I'm going to say, if it's Shadour, that's your quarterback room, and that's how they would proceed with it.
So then the other part of this, and again, our questioner said, do you think Kevin Stefanski has seen enough of Shadour? So let's say they fire Kevin Stefanski. Let's say they, and we don't know what's going to happen next Monday or next week, whenever things might go down. But let's say they do decide to move on from Kevin Stefanski. Does their coaching search basically get narrowed down only then to people who believe in Shedeur Sanders?
I think there's a strong possibility that they would try to do whatever they can to support Shedeur Sanders and make sure that he has a coach and a coaching staff that are going to maximize his ability, maximize his potential, and do whatever they can to bring out the best in him and focus just on his strengths and his abilities and really just do whatever they can to help him become a franchise quarterback. So yes, I think that if they decide that he is their QB, then I think the coach will have to fall in line with that plan. And so I think that this is all part of a big decision-making process that has to happen towards the end of the season. And I've said this before, I would create a quarterback board. I would create a little board of directors of good advisors, of people that you really trust that have had a good track record in selecting, coaching, identifying franchise quarterbacks, and get some input, get some other eyes on that. Now, I have been told that they did something similar to that last year. I didn't realize that, but I've been told that they did that. I thought I had this brilliant, unique idea. Um, but no, I do think that they will probably do something like that. And I think it's smart because sometimes when you're in the weeds or when you're inside of a situation, you get too close to it. You get too close to it and you can't see the forest for the trees. I'm using a lot of foliage references here. I understand this, but
It's
but I do
cold,
think
and we're trying to think like warm spring thoughts. That's
I just think that some outside viewpoints would be helpful.
yeah, and I think too, even to that regard, just some outside viewpoints on Shadour, right? Because
Yeah.
it's possible they're in some ways it's good that they're so close to Shadour because they're seeing everything that's happening inside that building. They know everything that's happening. I know Kevin today talked about, all the little things they work on with Shadour that includes operational stuff, which we've seen some issues with over the weeks. So they know everything that's going on with Shadour inside the building. So it's good that they're close to that. But it also might be a good idea to get some outside eyes on Shadour too, and what some people on the outside think of what they're watching, because it is it's very divided. I mean, there are people out there who, they're looking at the advanced metrics on Shedeur Sanders and they're just out. And then there's other people who, if you dare say he's not QB1, they think you are the biggest Shedeur Sanders hater in the world. I'm firmly in the I have no idea camp. Like, I don't know. There's some things there you really like, and then there's stuff there that I saw at Colorado that had me worried, and it's still there. And I see those advanced metrics, and that worries me a little bit. But again, sometimes you'll see some stuff on a Sunday watching these games, and it's like, there might be something there. So I don't know. And I think that's part of the problem. Like, if your answer is maybe, I don't know if that's good enough to just move forward with him as your number one option and your only number one option.
Right. And the tricky part about that, Dan, is the fact that even if you can get your hands on a quarterback that you like in the draft, the answer to that is also going to be maybe, right? It is so hard to identify these quarterbacks and to pick one that's going to be able to come in and win football games for you. Sorry, I have a cat meowing here.
Some Shedeur opinions there too.
I know how you feel. Um, but it's tricky. It's very, very tricky. I remember being at the Senior Bowl and really liking Malik Willis that year in 2022, when it was basically only Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis, and they were both there in that draft. They were both there at that Senior Bowl, and I watched them. I watched everything that they did. I talked to them. I talked to people about them, and I came to the conclusion that if I had a pick in that draft, that I would have taken Malik Willis. And I even wrote that. I wrote that the Browns should consider taking him with their first round pick and develop him. Well, maybe that didn't turn out to be the craziest idea in the world. For the first few years, I thought, oh, I guess I don't know what I'm looking at. I guess I just can't. I've lost my touch. I can't evaluate quarterbacks. And now it seems like he needed time to develop. He needed time and resources and coaching and figuring things out. And after he played against the Ravens the other night, plenty of people are saying he's going to start week 1 for someone next year, right? Maybe that'll be the Cleveland Browns. But I do think that it's hard to get it right. It is so hard to get it right. I mean, look, the Pittsburgh Steelers chose Kenny Pickett over him, and it didn't work out for them. So it's difficult. Even when you think you're nailing it, you might not be nailing it. And then when you think you're getting it wrong, you might not have gotten it wrong. Look at Sam Darnold. He's the perfect example. Time, seasoning, coaching, right situation, learning the game slowing down. I remember Dylan Gabriel said early this year in training camp that we live in a microwave society, or, we live in a, Amazon society. We have to have everything right now. I'm guilty of that, by the way.
I mean, that's the NFL, right?
Yeah. I mean, it has to be right now. And it doesn't. It doesn't. These young quarterbacks, they do need time to develop, and they don't really have that time anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of the thing that you hit there. So even if you take a Fernando Mendoza, if they manage to figure out a way to get him, or a Dante Moore or Ty Simpson, I mean, especially those last two, those guys don't have a lot of starts under their belts. It's probably not going to just be like instant gratification, like, hey, you're starting to win a bunch of football games now. Now it might look better, but it still can take time. I mean, even Jaden Daniels, year 1 goes to the NFC Championship game. We're coming into this year, and people are talking about, could he be a top 5 quarterback already? And then he has a year that's just injuries and can't stay on the field, and the team ends up stinking. It really can take time with these guys. I mean, it's easier to invest that time when a guy is a first round draft pick, number 2 overall, or in Caleb Williams' case, for example, the number 1 overall pick. Teams are more apt to give those guys more time than, say, a 5th round pick. But that's what the Browns are trying to figure out with Shadour. Do they see enough there over these 7 games to make themselves want to kind of build a little bit around him and see if it looks better? But also you risk, like, okay, what if you do that and you go 4-13 next year? Then what? So I don't know. I think it's a harder decision, especially now that they're sitting at number 6 in the draft. It's probably an easier decision if you would have been picking 1 or 2, but it's a harder decision now that you're sitting at number 6.
You know what I think? One of the things that stands out to me about Shedeur Sanders is that he takes coaching very well, and he self-corrects pretty quickly. And I think one of the things that I see when I look at him is that he's got a little bit of that gunslinger in him. I'm not breaking any big news here. He's got some gunslinger, and if he sees a one-on-one matchup that he likes, even though it's going to be a very high-risk pass, he's going to take it. And we've had other people in these parts that have been like that. That's Jameis Winston, right? But I think that Shadour is very, very good at coming back in after a game, processing everything, studying his film, talking things over, talking to the coaches and then trying to make corrections on those things. And I think that when he gets to the end of these 7 starts, I think he's going to see that he's got to pick his spots with some of those shots. And then I also think that he's going to have more weapons that he trusts and feels comfortable with to take those shots next season. And so what might be a huge risk this year might not be a big risk next year. There are times where if you have a Jamar Chase out there, you can throw a ball up in a certain radius and you know that he's going to come down with it. And once Shadour develops that trust with his pass catchers, he's going to have that magic, that dynamite, that sort of connection that Joe Flacco had with Amari Cooper. He's going to have that with a number of guys. I think he'll develop it more with Isaiah Bond. I think he and Jerry Jeudy made some strides yesterday. They have a ways to go with each other, but I thought they made progress. He still has to get it with Ced Tillman. They connected for a nice play yesterday, but just in terms of those deep shots down the field, I think he still needs to work on that with a Ced Tillman. He's already got it with Harold Fannin for the most part. So I think he's going to get better with those explosives, but that's one of the things that he's going to have to work on is picking his spots and not taking too many risks to the point where you're putting your team in harm's way.
So let's get to this question, and this kind of goes in contrast to the idea of the team committing to Shedeur Sanders. It comes from Zach in Talmadge. Hey, Mary Kay, would the Browns trade both their picks to move up and get a quarterback? Zach says he's a Shedeur fan, but doesn't think the Browns brass have enough time to wait out his growth. So could it be on the table? Let's say they stay around this area, and I'm looking right now. I mean, the lowest they could drop, even if they win on Sunday, is number 7. Everybody else behind them has 6 wins. So they're in about the range where they're probably going to end up in that 4 to 7 range. Could they take those 2 first-round picks, or maybe take that second Jacksonville pick and next year's first-round pick or something, and move up to try and get, whichever quarterback the Raiders don't take number 1 overall?
Yes, they can do that. They absolutely can do that. And it might come down to just that. It might come down to, can they decide that that player that they can get with that pick, is he going to be better and have better upside potential than what they have in Shedeur Sanders? And they're not going to know. They're not going to know exactly how this is going to work out. They're going to have to put all of their data and information into the hopper. And maybe they should just use AI, ask ChatGPT what they should do.
That's your quarterback committee is ChatGPT and whatever, Google Gemini and all of those things.
Throw everything into the hopper, and then they're going to have to make an educated guess. They're going to have to make an educated guess, and they might have to go on a somewhat of a gut feeling too. They might just have to say, we've seen some things in him, and we like these things, and we think that his upside potential exceeds that of Dante Moore, because I'm sure they like Dante Moore. What's not to like right now? Again, he doesn't have a whole lot of experience, but he's got a lot of great traits, got some really nice talent. But it's always a risk. It's always a risk. And sometimes the devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't know. And 7 games of Shedeur Sanders just might outweigh no pro games for the rookie they can bring in.
But the one thing they can't do is they can't be scared to make a big move like that. And I don't think, if Andrew Berry's the GM, there's nothing that's ever told us that he's scared of making big moves, right? Obviously, he's not scared of making big moves. We have seen that over and over again. So, they can't get so caught up in this idea of, we need a wide receiver. We need to rebuild this line. We need to do all these things. If they believe that Dante Moore is that guy and they can take, like I said, whether it's their first round pick this year and first next year, or it's Jacksonville's pick, whatever it is, and get up there to number 2 and take him, then that's what you have to do. Because it really, you can spend years building this roster out if you want, but none of it matters if you don't have a quarterback. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or somebody like that, but you've got to have a good quarterback. That's really that's ultimately what it comes down to. I was listening to Todd McShay did a redraft with his co-host on one of his latest pods. And it was funny. There were all these same teams that picked high last year, they were talking about the very like this team still needs a quarterback. This team still needs a quarterback. Like even if their picks were good, they still need a quarterback. So eh, in the end, you've got to get that solved. And if you really believe, let's just assume Las Vegas is going to take Fernando Mendoza. But if you really believe whichever quarterback is there at number 2 and you can go up and get him, you got to do it.
Absolutely. And the other thing to consider in this, when you are going over all of your data and all the pros and cons about this, is that you have already gone through a lot of growing pains with Shedeur Sanders, right? By the time he starts 7 games, that's a lot of experience to get in the NFL. So they're halfway there, really, in dealing with that rookie first year that everybody has to go through, right? The question becomes, are you prepared to go through another half of year of rookie growing pains like that with him? Or do you want to maybe start a veteran for a while? Or are you willing to turn it over to a rookie and go all the way back to square one and start with a fresh set of rookie growing pains and have him come up that learning curve? Now, if he's got a much upgrade supporting cast and you find a rookie that you really, really love and you think that he can be the face of your franchise and the leader of your football team, then I suppose you would be willing to turn it over to him, knowing that he's got a better offensive line and that he's got some better skill players out there and that he's got some other second year skill players that came from this year that have a ton of experience now and will be that much better next year. So they have to weigh all of these things, and it's tricky. It's really, really tricky. And it's a decision that I will try to make it. When all is said and done, we'll make it on this pod. We'll decide what we would do. But if I think I would be leery of having to be the one to make that for an organization because I just think it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, I think, obviously I have casually watched some of these guys, but like dig into Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore. Like this process really is just getting started in a lot of ways. And sort of like for these teams too, right? Obviously these GMs and their scouting departments have done a ton of work on these guys, but once we get through the season, now the coaches start getting involved and that can change the math on a lot of this too. So, we'll see. I don't know. I don't know the answer right now. I'd be a little leery to just hand things over to Shedeur Sanders based on these 6 games, but also if you're sitting there at 6 or 7 in the draft, you might not have much of a choice if you can't pull off that trade. So let's switch gears here. Let's go to this question from Jared in Columbus. It's about Jim Schwartz. Hey, Mary Kay, do you think Jim Schwartz, and this is a question people were asking a couple years ago too, do you think Jim Schwartz deserves a look as a head coach, and would he be interested if so?
Yes, he would be interested. He has told us that. And I do think he deserves a look as a head coach. But sometimes when the ship has sailed, the ship has sailed. Now, sometimes the ship comes back in, right? I mean, Pete Carroll is out in Vegas right now. Didn't go very well this year, but sometimes teams will go back and look at a coach, even an older coach like Jim Schwartz. He is considered an older coach at 59 or whatever he is. Sometimes they will go back and they will look at a coach like that who they think has learned a lot from their first stint as a coach and can come in and really do an amazing job. And I think he would be one of those guys. But I do think once you fall so far out of the head coaching cycle, I think it's really hard to get back in and get on someone's radar. So I don't know that anybody's going to come calling for him. But teams would be smart to do so. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's got a lot of things working against him, right? And they aren't all his fault, but one of them is he's a defensive coach, right? So that's always something that every coach has to overcome, including young coaches. Secondly, he's 59 years old, so it's not even like you'd be bringing in like a Jesse Minter, right? He's a defensive guy, but he's a young coach. You can sell that. And even though it's not his fault, even though his unit has been awesome all year, he's a coordinator on a 4-win football team right now. So there's a lot of things kind of working against him that an ownership or a GM, whoever was doing the hiring, would have to sell if they brought in Jim Schwartz. And on top of that, his stint in Detroit wasn't very good. Now that's sort of like the job. It used to be like the job here in Cleveland. It's hard to judge on wins and losses just based on what you did in Detroit in that era. But he has a lot working against him. And again, most of it's not his fault, but he would be a difficult sell. So I don't know. I don't know how many teams are going to come calling for him.
Well, I'll tell you what, if he put me down as a reference on his resume, I could sell Jim Schwartz as a head coaching candidate just based on what I've seen him do here with the Cleveland Browns, right? Because I've watched him deal with the media. He's amazing with the media, and I'm sure he's learned from some of his mistakes in Detroit. He's probably gotten a whole different perspective on how to do that whole piece of the job. And that is a big piece of the job. I think he's really learned how to deal with players and motivate players even better and better over the years. I think he's gotten the most out of guys like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. I mean, he's got this defense just playing so hard and so well. And as a team and as a unit, the energy is good. Um, he does all that very, very well. Just schematically, he's incredibly sound. And I think he gets the whole big picture piece of it as well. I think he'd be able to assemble a staff. That's part of it. And so, yeah, I think he's got everything that it would take to be an excellent head coach. But unfortunately, I'm not sure he'll get that chance.
So along those lines, though, and again, as we get into once we get through this Cincinnati game, whatever the Browns decide, let's say they do decide to move on from Kevin Stefanski. I, I wonder where Jim Schwartz fits into all of this, because obviously he's been so good for this team. He's built this defense into one of the best units in the league. Obviously, he's helped get Myles Garrett to new levels. He's done a lot of good here. So I wonder how the Browns would approach that if they moved on from Kevin. I'm sure they would give Jim an interview if they did that. But just from let's say they didn't want to give him the head coaching job. I- I mentioned Jesse Minter. If they went out and hired him or a Robert Saleh or someone like that, then Jim Schwartz is probably out the door. So I don't know. I wonder how Jim Schwartz factors into all of this if we are in a head coach hiring cycle for this team. If they would say, listen, we're moving on from Kevin, we're keeping Jim, and we're going to hire someone that wants Jim to be their defensive coordinator.
Well, I keep coming back to this, and I don't know if they would consider doing this or not. But the way that everybody talks in that building about Tommy Rees, about how he's
I've thought about this too.
right, how he's an offensive savant and how brilliant he is and how he's a leader of men. And you've got longtime coaches like Mike Bloomgren just praising him and Chad O'Shea praising him, guys that have been around really, really good coaches. And we know that Nick Saban, that he's a disciple of Nick Saban, that he's learned so much. And I know that the Browns don't want to let him out of the building. And I know he's had opportunities, and I know he will probably get more opportunities after the season. If they decide to part ways with Kevin Stefanski, and I don't know if they're going to do that or not, I have no idea. I really have no idea. I'm on record as saying I don't think they should do that. I think they have a good system in place right now. And I think they just need to get to winning with a quarterback. And I think maybe they're on their way with Shadour, and I think they need that offense to grow up a lot. But I think that Kevin Stefanski deserves a chance to work with this young, burgeoning offense that's coming up the learning curve. I think there's something special going on here. But in the event they decide to part ways with him, and of course, we hear all kinds of other rumors and reports that perhaps he might need a change of scenery himself. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard things like that. So if they decide to mutually agree to part ways, would the Browns consider promoting young 33-year-old Tommy Rees to head coach? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I just don't think it is. I think that if they like what they see with Shedeur Sanders, they like the development that he's made and the progress that he has made, maybe they will want to continue on with Tommy, with Bill Musgrave. Then you've got your senior defensive guy over here in Jim Schwartz, and you kind of just try to keep it going with a new and different vibe and then an upgraded supporting cast. And you let Tommy kind of run his show and do his thing. And sometimes teams take a leap of faith on a young guy like that. And he seems to be one of those guys that has that reputation in the NFL of sort of being that next almost genius offensive mind.
I say this very carefully because I don't want people to think I'm making this comparison, but it is worth noting that Sean McVay was 30 years old when he got hired, and everybody was like, "Wait, who? Sean McVay?" And he's become one of the best coaches in football. You could make the argument he's the best coach in the league right now. Now, I am not saying that's what Tommy Rees is going to become. I have no idea, and I don't know if that's the right move for the Cleveland Browns to do that, but that's what they would be trying to do, is sort of find that next guy and sort of get ahead on that next guy and hope he turns into, I don't know, 75% of what Sean McVay is as a head coach. I don't know. We've seen teams try this before. It worked for the Rams. It hasn't worked for other folks, but that's sort of the template you'd be trying to follow.
Right. And they have let other good young offensive minds out of the building, right? Kevin O'Connell got away. He was here as the quarterback's coach and he got away, and now he's a really, really good coach in Minnesota. Of course, Kyle Shanahan got away, and that was very, very controversial. But who knows what may have happened had they just kind of turned things over and fixed things so that Kyle could run the show here. Maybe that would have been a way they could have gone. He was young then too. So I do think there's a world in which, if in the event they do decide to part ways with Kevin, and I have no idea if that's in the plans, that they will give Tommy an interview and at least think about it.
Well, that's a fun way to end the podcast right there. Well, we're getting close to seeing how this all plays out finally. The Browns with one more game. They'll play on Sunday at 1:00 in Cincinnati. And then here we go. Then the real season starts, Mary Kay. You think the regular season has been exhausting. We're just getting into the real season once we finish up that game in Cincinnati.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, it is going to be one heck of an off season, right? It's going to be boom, boom, boom. We don't know who the coach is going to be yet. If it's Kevin Stefanski, makes our lives a lot easier in the early going of the off season. But then we move right into the Senior Bowl and we go into quarterback palooza. If they stick with Shadour, maybe that makes things a lot easier for us as well. So of course it's all about us. But no, there's a lot going on here. And again, they have 2 first-round picks. So it's going to be content, draft, Super Bowl, Senior Bowl, you name it.
It never ends. It never ends in the NFL, and especially with this football team. So we'll be there all along the way. Cleveland.com/Browns, of course, is where it all lives. That's where you can become a Football Insider subscriber. That's where those questions came from. It's the blue banner at the top of the page. Our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on Cleveland.com. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave us reviews. Say nice things about us in the comments. We always appreciate that stuff. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.